Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're here today to discuss AI, edge, and cyber defense, together with our very own Carmi Boga, VP Business Development at Hub Security, who is joined today by a number of industry experts, including Ramesh Menon, who will join us in a bit, Dr. Malek bin Salem, Felipe Piccirilo, Ramanathan, Arunachalam, and Ashish Kapar. Thank you all for being here today. We'll start our webinar with a brief introduction from our very own Carmi Boga, and then our panelists will each get the chance to briefly introduce themselves. Afterwards, we'll get into a bit of a deeper discussion on everything related to AI, edge, and cyber defense. And as usual, if you have any questions throughout the discussion, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section below. Now we have an impressive lineup of panelists, and I'm excited to have them introduce themselves. But first, a few words from Carmi Boga.
Hi, Moran. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have a really good and impressive discussion, certainly by the caliber of all the people here as the panelists. I hope that the participants will gain some knowledge about this. Just a tiny little bit about myself and a little bit about Hub Security and why we're talking about this topic. So I've been selling working on platforms that provide security for over 30 years. Initially video-based systems and video security, which probably most of the panelists actually used or viewed the technology that we sold, although they didn't know it. Hub Security provides a secure computing environments for many different types of applications. And one of the most interesting aspects is edge computing. And within the edge computing is AI at the edge. So edge computing has a lot of interesting aspects from a security point of view. One, it's dispersed. It's not necessarily in a big centralized computer room or in the cloud. By definition, it's at the edge, so it's out there being not necessarily just a vernacular term, but a real term. And so its protection is physically more difficult. The access to it is easier, and there's lots of attributes involved. AI even makes it more challenging and more important. We have more and more AI systems. I don't know if we're going to go down a ChatGPT rabbit hole in this discussion. We could, because it's on everybody's mind when we say AI, but I'd like to stay at the edge. And AI has got issues, not only, first of all, if regular computing runs in a CPU, many times AI runs in a GPU, and GPUs are not designed for security at all, unlike CPUs. So that's one challenging asset. And the other thing is that you can hack AI just by sending it the wrong data, something that is also hard to do for analytic or regular non-AI applications. So in AI, you have to protect the data, you have to protect the environment, and you have to protect the actual AI knowledge, or the knowledge base, and the algorithm running inside. And all these topics, I think, will be things that we can go into. So thank you all for joining, and over to you, Moran.
Thank you, Carmi. We're so glad you could be here with us today. And now I'd like to take a few minutes to do a quick introduction round, starting with Ashish. Ashish, can you share with our listeners a bit about yourself and your field of expertise?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Mohan. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are based. My name is Ashish, and I'm the Vice President and Head of Security Consulting Services at Entity for APAC, Asia Pacific region. So I'm based in Singapore, almost midnight here. I have about 22 years of information security domain experience. In my current role, I'm responsible for managing all the cybersecurity consulting practice portfolio management, delivery, pre-sales leadership, as well as acting as an evangelist and thought leader for Entity on all things security. brief introduction there. Looking forward to sharing my thoughts along with all other esteemed panelists here together with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Malek, hi.
Hi, really happy to be with you today. Thanks for joining. My name is Malek bin Salem, and I am with Accenture. I'm a managing director for emerging tech security. I lead globally our trustworthy AI practice, and I lead our data practice within North America. Prior to joining Accenture, I've spent some time with IBM focused also on data mining, and it wasn't called AI back then, but it was a lot of data mining and analytics for various applications. So happy to be joining this discussion today.
Thank you. Ramesh, hi.
Hi, I'm Ramesh Menon. I have some net connectivity issues, so I'm not sure if it will work if I turn my video. Sometimes if it breaks up, I'll turn it off. Let me try.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Ramesh Menon. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at United States Department of Defense. I'm primarily leading artificial intelligence and emerging technologies like quantum computing to advance our national security capabilities. Prior to that, I spent many years at IBM. I was a CTO at IBM. And prior to that, I was in industry for many years across healthcare and other research areas. So glad to be here and look forward to sharing and exchanging information on this important topic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Swami, hi.
Hi, I'm Swaminathan. I'm VP and Head of Technology, more from a telecom side from HCL. Before HCL, I was with Nokia for 23 years, more focusing on 6G edge computing, and then also the security on the 6G side. Now, in this organization, I'm more focusing on the product portfolio, more towards the AI-based products, where if you see the security is so important, HCL is also having more 360-degree offering on the services side. Also, they are having some IPs on products more to do with the application security, and then also the edge security here. I'm very happy to be here and then learn from the panelists, and then also would like to answer questions coming from the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Felipe, hi.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me, Moran and Carmi. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. So Felipe Piccirilo, I'm based in Helsinki, Finland, but moving from Brazil to Europe and to many other international experiences. And yeah, I guess we all here have our fair share passing through IBM, some of us just like myself. 20 years in technology, and over the last 5 years helping Deloitte with the CIO program and tech research pieces. So trying to sort it all of these things and helping CIOs to manage all this craziness of new technologies.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to divide today's event into 3 topics: market and technology overview, challenges and risks, and solutions and approaches. And our first topic is a brief overview of the market and technology. And I want to start with you, Ramesh. What is your definition of edge AI?
Very, very good question. I would say we are evolving into a world of digital platforms. The platform-based business models are taking into shape. And that could mean multiple things for multiple people, but as it's a step-by-step progress, the hardware, software, everything comes along, more and more items are moving into software-based capabilities, and it could be deployed anywhere, right? For me, within US government, it's about extracting value from our data. For what? For decision support, decision augmentation, and decision automation based on this platform capability. Now, once we create these algorithms, I should be able to deploy it anywhere, whether it's land, air, sea, space, cyber, anywhere, right? So the ability to have that operational flexibility to achieve what you want to do to some level can be enabled by edge capabilities. I think one of my colleagues briefly talked about 6G, right? When we talk about network slicing and using AI, ML for network slicing and RAN, things like that. So there are many different ways how you look at it. So it's different for different people, but for me, it's ability to operate in contested environments, provide that decision support to a human being, protect lives. How do we effectively integrate these capabilities for various missions and humanitarian needs?
Thank you. Dr. Malek, what technologies are enabling edge AI?
Well, I think there are a number of technologies that are helping support this advancement in the development of edge AI. Obviously, hardware improvements, right? The new custom chips that are being developed, FPGAs, ASICs, GPUs themselves, etc. Those are very enabling us to do advanced AI and be able to build more complex models, including at the edge. 5G technology obviously is also enabling some of the use cases that happen at the edge because of the reachability of compute at the edge. So you can think of use cases around autonomous driving, around retail or operational technology, predictive maintenance, all of those types of use cases. And then you have software technologies such as Tiny ML and TensorFlow Lite, which are enabling us to build a class of neural network implementations that are smaller in size, that have less complexity, and that are more amenable to be deployed at the edge. And then finally, I'd like to highlight some of the computing techniques, such as, or machine learning techniques, such as federated learning, which allow also for machine learning to happen in a distributed manner. So having multiple machine learning models being trained on local data before you can build a central model, by learning or exchanging information between those smaller federated models. So I think it's a bunch of technologies which are very exciting that are helping us really advance this field.
We have a question from the audience. Jonathan is asking, and I think Felipe, this is a question for you. We would like to know which companies already use this technology and how many do you think will take it up this year? Basically, Jonathan's asking about industries investing in edge AI or other innovations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that's quite interesting point, because we had a global research with tech executive and business executives, right? Technology, any business can pretty much do their own investments and prioritize investments in technology. And we talk with more than 1,300 executives across the globe, which is gives us a quite nice number that we can pick it from. Obviously, first, most of the organization's priorities are around growth and also retaining customers, right? But if we compare that to what technology executives are prioritizing or understanding as a priority, are about modernizing and securing their environments. So, which is a kind of conflict already over there, right? Between, obviously, they understand that growth and optimization is important, but they understand there is a tech debt that they need to catch up to. Now, even before putting new technologies in place, right? But now, in terms of industries, one thing that we saw quite bullish investments in innovation is on the automotive industry. And whilst talking to some of our beloved clients there, is that there's a lot of innovation that they're having to put in place, especially in terms of autonomous vehicles, for example, just to mention one, that requires a lot of AI at the edge, for example, right? So it requires a lot of capability to be making sense of all the data, dealing with complex situations right at the edge before, depending on 5G networks, transforming all data, transporting all data, and so forth. So that's a kind of an interesting glimpse that we saw from our study last year that I thought it could be maybe help in this response there.
Carmi, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I wanted to give two different examples, and actually I'll come back to the one that Felipe said, but with a little twist. So one of the first projects we did at Hub was related to AI and data security. The AI was used to analyze MRIs and medical data, and obviously the edge was that these machines are not located necessarily in computer rooms, and the data security had to deal with all of the HIPAA related data privacy that goes along with anything related to something medical. So while you wouldn't think that an MRI necessarily would lead itself to be AI and edge and security, it is. The other one is autonomous driving, but I think people should look at, there are two approaches. One of the approaches I'd like people to look at afterwards is a company called WAYVE. WAVE is a company that is doing what they call autonomous vehicles version 2. Most of the approaches to autonomous driving is LiDARs, tons of maps, tons of data, back-end analysis, and then shoving data forward to the poor car to help it drive. And WAVE is looking at it like AI is human. When I drive, I don't have a map in my head. I might have one on a GPS to tell me where I'm going, but when I control the car, I don't have a map. And I don't have data analysis coming into me. And they actually achieve pretty good results just from taking a perspective that this has to be complete AI. It has to be human learning. And there's an excellent video you can see of them driving, well, sitting in a car, not holding the steering wheel, driving around London, which is not necessarily conducive to it's not easy. It's not a nice, easy training thing for anybody who's driven on the wrong side of the road. Sorry, I'm American. I'm the British side of the road in London in a real life experience. I would say that more and more and more and more and more parts of our life are going to become AI. That's just, soon we might not even distinguish between what's AI and what is conventional computing. I think they're going to get merged into each other. And also, I think the edge right now, the only way I can define it inclusively is to say it's not the cloud. Anything else that isn't in a generic cloud is at some sort of edge.
Yeah, I think a really good example. Well, you started with that. You started with talking about healthcare. I think AI is a great example for healthcare because in AI and life sciences, huge amounts of medical data, personal information is always being processed. And yeah, it's, as you said, it's MRI. It can be an MRI. It can be anything from hospitals to research labs.
Yeah, and just to build on top of that, there are some definitely AI that can use to monitor patients and detect signs of distress, right? So right in ICUs and so forth. So that's quite an interesting application that we saw as well, and not like Carmi mentioned, not connected necessarily to the cloud, right? It can really identify very subtle signals of distress that a doctor would hardly would pass unnoticed by sometimes.
Swami, how do you think Edge AI would help, let's say, the telecom industry? Swami?
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry. AI, particularly the edge intelligence, right? It's a critical paradigm for 5G and then future 6G systems. as we are deploying or plan to deploy the intelligent edges in 5G networks, it's so important. And then AI is intended to be incorporated in various network layers, right? So, but for today's discussion, we could mainly focus on the mobile device and then the base station, which is the network edge. So there are two edges, right? When we talk about, there is a user who would be using the mobile. That's an edge from an end user point of view, but from a network ops point of view, the base station is a network edge. So we need to think about both the edges. Here, the demand is increasing as a result of use cases driven solutions like, as we have already discussing about autonomous cars and mobile robots, if you see, because they are demanding low latency, high redundancy capabilities, as well as if you see on the industrial and then supply chains, they are seeking more transparency and then resilience in the post-COVID-19 environment. So these are the use cases which we are needing the AI. That could be one area. And then also, if you see from a telco operator's point of view, end users' quality of experience is very, very important KPI, right? The edge AI enables low latency, since the inference is going to be conducted locally, and then also minimizing the delay in connecting with the cloud. So it will be reducing also the bandwidth demand and then cost, right? So all these things putting together, edge AI would be very, very important. Moreover, edge AI addresses the data security and privacy problems, right? We have already talking about the life sciences and then more from the medical side, but also from the telco sides, if you see data security and then privacy of the customer. So we don't want to share it with anyone else. So that security is also important. So one more thing I would like to point out here is the AI is also used to strengthen the security. This topic is, we are thinking that what is the security threats and then how are we going to solve the edge AI? But edge AI is also being used or planned to be used to strengthen the security. And for example, right, they'll be identifying the irregularities in the radio communication. That's one of the things which will be very much useful, right? There are other use cases, as we have been seeing from the 6G, if you see, sensing is going to come, and then the autonomous networks where edge AI would be an excellent enabler. Yeah. Back to you. Thanks.
I want to talk about a bit about AI strategies. Ramesh, can you explain the Department of Defense AI strategy?
Sure, it's a loaded question. So one of the very simple way to explain that is, how do we extract the value from data that we already have? We have lots of data, right? And it can be enabled by platforms. It can be enabled by your mission priorities and use cases. There are multiple ways you can look at it, as I mentioned earlier, like what are your decision support scenarios, which is like a HR system. What is the best person for this job for a 6-month rotation? Or a decision augmentation system, which is more like the autopilot in your Tesla car, which will help provide a safe way for a human machine to work. Or it could be a decision automation system like earthquake warning systems, right? You don't have time for somebody to wait for 1 hour and then give a notification. It has to be real time. You evacuate people for public safety kind of scenarios. And using these paradigms and scenarios, it's a business model change, obviously, how we work. It's about human-machine teaming and machine-machine teaming. There are two aspects of it. So we need to really understand, how do we effectively integrate or effectively partner with these intelligent machines for an explainable and responsible AI, which doesn't go rogue, right? So there are things like technical metrics many people know, like bias and drift and F-scores on a machine learning model, but there are also fundamental discussion on what is the role of a human in the society and what is the role of a machine. And at least from a DOD perspective, we always are holding human beings accountable. We may use machines, we may have very intelligent machines, but there's always a human being who's in charge. And that is where when we look at human machine teaming. So when we established our AI strategy, we looked at 5 different pillars. It started off with the most important part, skills. Do our workforce have the skills and talent to be ready for next decade? Right? I cannot look in 3 months, 6 months time. I have to plan ahead for maybe next 10 years. And nobody can go and hire thousands of people overnight. That is also not an answer. So I have to upskill and cross-skill my existing people. Second comes platforms and tools. Do I have the existing digital platform framework? So my definition of digital platform is my existing data center, my supercomputing clusters, my hybrid multi-clouds, my edge nodes, everything is part of the digital platform. And the data that is on this digital platform had to be extracted and exploited, provided as APIs for somebody to consume, or so it enables that, like an AI fabric. Think of like a data fabric, but where you have ML ops, where you have shared machine learning models, and you are sharing that. It could be a foundational model, it could be domain adapted model, whatever it is. And then we looked at our mission applications. Where do we really need it? Especially for our joint missions, working with our alliance and partners around the world. How do we integrate land, air, sea, space, and cyber into one integrated operations? And above and beyond, we are heavily focusing on collaboration with industry, academia, and our partners and allies around the world. And going back to the discussion on explainable and responsible AI, we also want to make sure we have policies in place. Sometimes the technology is moving very fast, policies are catching up. So we are also looking at what do we need in terms of policy for governance and oversight for this responsible and explainable AI. It could be around delegation of authority. It could be around role of synthetic data in a machine learning model. So we need true transparency for effective human-machine teaming. And that's where we are going with DOD's broad AI strategy, and provide that digital platform capabilities for broader ecosystem expansion.
And other than defense, Ashish, do you have any other use cases we're already seeing of leveraging AI at the edge?
Thanks. I think obviously this is the most interesting question as well, right? Because at the end of the day, AI is being used to, there are certain key advantages in terms of using edge AI, reduce latency, real-time analytics, higher speeds, lower costs. Some of other panelists also already talked about higher operational efficiencies, and sometimes you never know, right? Even improve reliability, because you don't really have, this is like a decentralized model of sorts. You don't need an uplink network or internet at all the time. But in terms of the main use cases, what comes to mind, and I think some of them have been touched upon by other panelists already, obviously, is the autonomous vehicles, smart factories, quite a lot, I think, in terms of defect detection, as well as improvement in efficiencies. Healthcare is a big sector. In fact, I was actually reading some reports, and I think the predictions from, and this is from Forbes and Statistica and some of the folks, that they said that by 2025, the amount of data that will be analyzed in healthcare for AI-related use cases would be about 10 zettabytes. Now that's like 10 trillion gigabytes of data. So healthcare is going to be a very important use case, but like I think Carmi mentioned, you have to be very careful in terms of how you use that data responsibly, like Ramesh even touched upon, that those ethics are very important in that setting. So beyond healthcare, I would say robots. So robotic kind of context, again, a big use case there. 3.5 million robots are already working across the world in 2022. So that's a huge number, and more will grow. And I think obviously from an autonomous vehicles perspective, like I said, that's like, again, there are several use cases that are already being tried in terms of self-driven vehicles and things like that. A lot of use cases there as well. And I think in terms of future use cases, I do foresee a very interesting cocktail that may emerge on AI and quantum. But anyways, that's maybe for some other day.
We have a couple questions from our audience. The first one is, who are the biggest players today using AI? And this is a really good one. Can someone explain the difference between normal AI and edge AI? Feel free to answer.
So I'll try to do not the players. I'll try to do edge AI and normal AI. And I think Dr. Malek helped. So normal AI would be, I'm just going to call it cloud-based AI, would be where your CPU and computing, your GPU, your computing power for running your AI algorithms is in the cloud. And so you would send your data to the cloud and get your answers from the cloud. And as Swami pointed out, this method is certainly not very efficient in response time and turnaround time due to the length of communication with the cloud. So if you were driving an autonomous car and you needed to wait 300 milliseconds to send something up and back, you'd probably crash into something. That's not very good. If you were doing an autonomous factory and you needed to make quick decisions on if something's going to fall off a conveyor belt, the time it would take to go up and back to the cloud, even if you got the decision right, you'd have a mess on the floor. So the edge is actually moving the algorithms out of the cloud environment or out of a back-end platform environment, like a data center environment, closer to where they're being used for response time and backup and things like that. So that's the difference between edge AI and non-edge AI. And then we learned about
Dr. Malek?
Yeah, what I'll add to that is obviously it is closer to the edge and to the end user. It offers the benefits of lower latency, reduced costs because you don't have to send data back and forth. It offers other benefits, lower security risk because the data is distributed. So companies are not vulnerable to an entire, database being, all of their data sets being leaked because they're centrally located. It offers other benefits such as privacy in certain use cases. If the data is being handled and kept on endpoint devices and the machine learning models are, at least used locally on your mobile phones, for certain use cases, obviously, then your data is kept private, right? So that has the privacy benefit. So those are 2 points that I wanted to highlight as we talk about differences between edge AI and the normal or centralized AI.
We have a question from Irfan. Ashish, since we are talking about the healthcare industry, what sort of impact, in your opinion, can AI have on the privacy and data security?
Oh, very interesting question. Like I mentioned earlier, I think from a HIPAA, which is kind of a US centric regulation in the industry, there are very important protections that are required for electronic payment, electronic protected health information, right? EPHI, as it is called in HIPAA. So I think from a challenges, and I think it's kind of covered in some of the other sections that we have in this webinar. But if I can quickly touch upon that, there are definitely some ramifications because organizations, while like Dr. Malek mentioned, there is obviously this element of decentralization in edge AI, where you kind of store the data on the edge or in the endpoints. But then that also brings in a lack of governance that may creep in terms of protecting that information, both from a security standpoint and from privacy standpoint as well. So it's always kind of a balancing act. And I think it's better to be watchful than to be sorry, is what I would say. And of course, there are some things that we will touch upon in detail later. So this is kind of a question that possibly could easily help us go into the next section very soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashish. Moving on to our second topic, challenges and risks. Dr. Malek, how mature is edge AI?
Well, I think it's still an emerging technology, despite the use cases that were mentioned by Ashish and others. I think there are some use cases that are more mature than others. If you think about visual inspection or predictive maintenance, those are use cases that are becoming more common across industries. There's also use cases around real-time analytics that are becoming more, that are being used more. So think about, the data collected by IoT sensors that is being used to make used for some analytics and being used to make some decisions if the AI application is integrated with other applications. And I can think of applications such as inventory management or supply chain and physical safety system use cases where those real-time analytics can be beneficial. On the other hand, there are use cases that are less mature. So if you think about immersive experiences through AR or VR devices, that's a less mature use case. Gaming as well is still not as mature. So I think it's emerging. Adoption is probably around 10% to 20%, if I dare to say. But the maturity varies by use case.
Could you highlight some risks associated with edge AI?
Sure. Generally, edge AI has the same risks as the cloud-based AI in terms of the making sure that the model is accurate and is making the right predictions, in terms of the importance of curating a high integrity, high veracity data set in order to prevent any data poisoning types of attacks, any backdoors into the machine learning models. So model accuracy risks, the limited power, limited processing power risks, I think. In some cases, if you don't have enough processing power at the end, you end up with the model not, or the prediction or the action not being taken in a timely manner. The risks of the heterogeneity of the devices that, or the infrastructures that AI models are deployed onto. But I will add another risk in terms of how we interact or how the end users interact with these, with edge AI. I think there is a risk of AI over-reliance. If we trust these, we want to trust these models. We want to build models that we trust so that we can use them. But there is a risk of over-relying on the AI to make the decisions. And we don't want to be in that space. On the other hand, we want to be able to understand how the AI application or the machine learning model is making decisions. So we want to build AI that is trustworthy, that is transparent and explainable. And I can see that as one of the major risks. Also, specifically for edge AI, I don't know if it's a risk or not, at least not at this point, but with the emergence of these, foundation models, large language models, it seems like there is a lot more emphasis now on that type of AI, which obviously cloud-based, right? It consumes a lot of resources. So hopefully that does not slow down edge AI. That's my hope.
Felipe, okay, so who in a company is responsible for AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, when we did, well, by the way, when we did this research as well last year, and we asked more than 700 of the tech executives to say, what is your top one priority in a company, right? If you have to list the first one. And what was interesting is that we're seeing a dispersion so big, that there were more than 11, there were actually 12 different top one priorities for the tech executives at each company, which means a lot that, depending on the company, depending on the industry, they have a very specific top one priority, one being business digital strategy development that might be led by the CIO, innovations being led by the CDO, and security and risk by CISOs, and so forth. So, and even if in a few cases, some of the applications being use case driven, very specific. So, and they would lead that application with the support of the executive and technology teams. So it really depends, as a good consultant, it really depends on the case by case. But as you see, this dispersion of the mandate, it's quite interesting that this is not a single person job. It's more a team player kind of decision, how, where, and when you're going to implement AI. So that's really up to to this point, as far as I can tell.
Swami, what are the new types of attacks that mobile networks are exposed to with edge AI?
Yep. As I've already, the previous person who have already talked about it, not much different from what we had from the cloud, but what it is happening now is the threat surface is really high, right? And then, so due to that, it's maybe let me get into the different types of attacks. It may be similar to whatever we have in cloud AI, but something like for the AI and ML algorithms open up the access network. The access network is more on the ready access network to new sort of attacks, right? So attacks on the machine language algorithm by itself. We could divide that maybe more like in poisoning attacks or evasion or in inference attacks. So the poisoning attacks, if you see, they try to influence the learning result by changing the data or the learning algorithm during the model training phase itself. Because with the edge AI, what we are trying to do is we are also trying to bring the model training into the edge, right? Not only the inference part, or it is not only the other influencing the model, but also we are creating the model at the edge. So even that the poisoning attacks could happen at the edge. That is one. And then evasion attacks is directed by the inference steps based using the testing phase. The attacker attempts to circumvent the model by introducing minor changes to the input value. So he could even influence it, the creation of the model. So that's one. And then the inference attacks, right? So it is also, they could known as an reverse engineering. Basically, they could seek to retrieve the training data or the labels and identify the model architecture by themselves. So it's like a model theft could happen if it is, as it is, it's more the threat surface is higher, that could happen. So when we look into the more from a telco point of view, they were feeling that if it is more in the data center, it is more secure and then they have more control. Now, if they are going to be decentralized, it's really tough to put it behind the closed doors, right? So if it is a base station, it may be even open. If you just see the tower, it is open. So it's more like it is more vulnerable. And then the other one, if we need to see, is more the explainability. We are decentralizing it. So the centralized team is not having control over it. So they don't even know that why that happened like that, right? So that's another explainability part which we need to look into it. These are the areas I would say that it is more from a telco point of view. Yeah, that's thanks for the question.
AI could, I'm thinking AI could be abused or misused. Ashish, do you have any key scenarios where AI could be abused or misused?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think Swami touched on some of the risk, and I think Dr. Malek also kind of alluded to some of the inherent vulnerabilities or challenges or risks that exist in edge AI. I mean, from an edge AI application perspective, it's anyway subject to a number of security threats. You know, it could be adversarial attacks, it could be confidentiality issues, it could be data privacy disclosure. In fact, we also recently how one of the most interesting generative AI platform, ChatGPT, had an incident about disclosure of personal data, post which I think, if I'm not wrong, Italy has actually gone ahead to ban ChatGPT at a national level unless they see substantial improvement on its privacy and data protection control. So, you know, it's like this is an evolving field. Specifically to answer your question, I think maybe not specific to edge AI, but AI in general has the potential to be abused. And there are certain ways in which it can happen. One is about obviously, from an ethical standpoint, I think Mr. Ramesh talked about it in terms of ethics of AI earlier. Surveillance, I think it's the biggest issue where AI can be used to conduct mass surveillance. In fact, this topic was very recently, if I'm not wrong, about a few weeks back, raised by Google's former CEO, Eric Schmidt, where he said, and I quote, those in AI industry have to make sure that the technology doesn't harm, but just help. So there is this very pertinent set of AI abuse that not just governments, but senior technology executives are fully aware of. That's one. Secondly, from like I think Swami mentioned in terms of transfer learning attacks, where a lot of pre-trained models do exist, where all these AI and ML systems are used to leverage them through reinforced or specialized learning. So it's obviously important to kind of have strong anomaly detection to protect. Cyber attacks can also be there, leveraging OSI intelligence, open source intelligence, and other information available. And in fact, because we also investigate a lot of security data breaches and incident, we are seeing attacker techniques that are being enhanced with support from artificial intelligence used in a malicious context. And obviously, from a manipulation and misinformation perspective, we've all seen a lot of hue and cry in terms of how public opinions have been influenced, and a narrative could be driven with such manipulation and misinformation, sometimes disinformation. And obviously, discrimination is another one where AI could be abused to, by design, discriminate. And if I extrapolate that, it could even lead to some human rights issues as well.
We have a question from our audience to Dr. Malek. Can you expand your insights on federated model structures?
Sure. So federated learning basically is a machine learning approach where several machine learning models are built locally, right, on local data, whether it be using locally on endpoint devices or on machines at the edge that are closer to the edge with local data. Then they communicate with a central model certain parameters of these local models, right? And the central model aggregates that information without getting access to the local data. So a central model is being trained while all the data that may be sensitive is kept locally and is not shared with anybody. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Another question from our audience. I see Carmi typing an answer.
It's okay. I stopped.
No, you can answer. You can answer that question. How will you protect the data on endpoint in a remote traveling environment when you are moving the computer and data processing on the endpoint? If a piece of computer is stolen or misplaced, this would make our data more vulnerable on the endpoint than in a centralized cloud server, because we can remove permissions from a user to stop them from accessing cloud resources. Carmi, you started typing an answer.
Yes.
Feel free to answer live.
Yeah. Okay, so I just need to go up a level. There's data is in three different modes. Static data setting on the disk. The easiest way to protect static data is encrypted on the disk. Even if somebody steals, it doesn't really matter if you have physical access to it. If you don't have physical access to the keys used to encrypt it, we consider that secure. Data in transit normally is referred to data going over networks. Again, data in that mode can be encrypted, and VPNs and all kinds of encryption of the pipe or the data packets themselves normally protect that. The tricky thing is data being used, data in use, data under analysis. Data under analysis, in particular data under analysis by AI, cannot be encrypted. And there's no homomorphic encryption for AI, which it hardly works for anything. It certainly doesn't work for AI. And so the data that is being analyzed by the AI application or by any other application is normally in the clear. And when it is in the clear, it is by definition vulnerable to the attacker because it's not protected. So Hub believes in isolation, and basically to get data in and out of a computing environment, you normally need to go through the network, okay? And especially if you limit other ins and outs, like if you limit physical USBs and other things of that manner for getting data out, and you limit the in and out to the network cards or the network connectivity, then you can protect access to and from the network to protect attackers from getting in and protect data from getting out. It's sort of like locking the door, where the door is the network interface. That is the webinar answer, which is very high level and hopefully it'll create some interest. And then there's a lot of in-depth to do to that. It's hard to give protecting data in use justice in the 5-minute answer. I would like to say one other thing that it should not be confused with, at least for AI. There is something called confidential computing. Confidential computing is encrypting data in memory while it's being computed, something like Intel SGX. That stuff does not isolate. It can encrypt stuff in usage, is not relevant for AI, just for the most part, unless your AI is being done in Intel SGX processors. And so for the most part, and certainly is not applicable to GPUs at this point, although NVIDIA has said that they might be coming out with this as a release. Anyway, so that's what makes stuff fun. I did want to relate to other things about AI and attacking and the dangers, because I think there's a few interesting things. One is everybody can look online and see the Pope wearing a funny white coat. It's a nice new picture. It is created by AI and it looks really real, and it's not real. So when AI is giving us the ability that, seeing is believing, seeing is no longer believing. Hearing is believing. Talk about deep fakes, hearing is no longer believing. AI has really complicated our eyes and our ears and our ability to see things and know that they're true due to the ability the AI has to really fake things up really, really well. So that's one thing that we need to deal with. AI has brought us lots of wonderful analysis, but also popes wearing puffy jackets. And another scary issue is an article I read. Now I'm going to get really technical, so for the non-techies, go a little bit away. There's something called QKD, which is a key transfer mechanism that was managed by Ramesh that Hub Security works with, that uses quantum physics to compute keys, okay, or transfer key information between two different machines, unlike what we normally use today, which is math that is hard. By the way, computers also think math is hard. In fact, factoring prime numbers seems to be hard to computers, but it's getting easier. So we invented QKD. Okay, what does this have to do with AI? Well, when you generate quantum physics, you create side channels, and side channels can be analyzed to determine keys. If you don't know what a side channel is, just think about something making unintended noise. So to protect side channels, you create noise. Noise protects your side channels, except AI can see through the noise. So AI can be used to break or help break some of the most secure encryption and key exchange mechanisms just because it's really good in analyzing noise. And that we're just beginning. One other comment, I don't think outlawing ChatGPT is a good idea. First of all, it won't hold. Second of all, VPNs will get you around anything. So geographic constraints on using web-based software is not necessarily very very useful, to say the least. But
Carmi, thank you. Ashish, you unmuted yourself.
No, I didn't. Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Sorry?
No, I just said nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay. One more question from our audience. Typically cameras used to monitor manufacturing facilities, healthcare setup, or defense are not always updated with the firmwares and prone to DOS denial of service attacks, etc. What are your thoughts on ensuring cameras, as they become smarter and are protected like other edge-based assets? Your thoughts and recommendations can help. Okay, panelists, this one's for whoever wants to answer.
Maybe I can take a stab at it. So I think the camera is just, one of the other edge devices. We do a lot of work on operational technology, security, as well as IoT security. And one of the things that is important is when you implement security controls, you just don't implement controls specific to a device or to an endpoint. I think the security controls are critically important from a defense in depth perspective to be implemented not just at the device or endpoint, but as well as in the surrounding network that the device sits in. And that's where I think edge AI becomes tricky, because you may have to then draw those so-called boundaries in which you want to protect certain parts of the network. You can't protect everything in your estate, right? That's very difficult. So I think the way things can possibly work is obviously to implement some hardening on some of these cameras in terms of some of the baseline security settings, making sure from a prevention standpoint. And then, of course, you need to detect the anomalies or abnormal activities, unknown unknowns, so to say, in the network in which these cameras are sitting. And that's something that, again, technologies are available, because I think prevention is only one part of the story. There is a huge amount of investments and importance of detection response there. I guess I would say not an easy answer to give, but within the purview of this webinar, I think that's how I would answer that question.
yeah, I just wanted to give a name to what I said. He said you can't protect everything, and he's right. We have a term for that. Today, it's called zero trust. And zero trust is, Ramesh can probably give us all the government regulations related to zero trust, which they are long and in depth and very interesting. And they're based on the fact that that firewalls don't work anymore, and protecting things, cameras are just one issue. And so you have, I can't say better, security in depth, where you create more and more secure areas, and each area protects itself, creating a zero trust environment, meaning it doesn't depend on security for stuff outside its environment. And the smaller the zero trust environment, the more that the stuff inside is secure, just by definition, because there's less stuff getting in. So the long answer to your citywide 10,000 camera thing is, it's really hard to protect 10,000 cameras on poles all over the city. You can try, but it's much better to provide defensive depth to the people that are, to the software and systems analyzing the output of those cameras, and to look for anomalies being generated so you can plug the holes later.
Okay, we have a couple questions. Ramesh, the couple questions for you. The first one, how do you ensure verification and validation for explainable and responsible AI? And bear with me, we have a couple more from our audience.
So that's a very important part, right? Explainable and responsible AI, and V&V is important not only for ensuring we have a closed loop system, because we take some data, ABC, create a model, and that model is used in some application. And when we're using it for inferencing or learning or reasoning, depending on the algorithm, it can become something else. So we need to make sure that the reason why you created a model and how it's being used is always aligned. Now, from a US government perspective, it's much more broader aspects. I believe last year, President Biden passed a regulation or at least a executive order on AI Bill of Rights, where he wants all the AI systems to comply or align with the US Constitution. What does that mean? So we here in Department of Defense created something called responsible AI, where we have V&V and assurance of the system, and it is measurable, it is uniform, and it can be applied consistently across different kinds of technologies and platforms. It cannot be some very narrow what works for LSTM versus GAN. It's not at that level, but at a broader level where we take or requirements. When I say requirements, the non-functional requirements, right? Typically, there is NIST 853 controls for security, right? Where people get an authority to operate their system in federal government. It's similar. NIST has passed a RMS framework, risk management framework for AI. And that's a good starting point for most of the companies. When you create a product, launch into the market, it's good to say that I'm complying with the NIST RMF framework. So that will give some baseline assurance level. But it also is important to understand, how did you train your data? What data set did you use? Did you pull it off some public open source data set and train it and then you're reselling it? There's legal liability aspects of it. What does indemnification and transfer of risk happens, right? Because if you're selling something to me and you don't even know how you created your AI model, there's a problem here, right? So the chain of trust is very important, similar to any supply chain. So it goes back to, there's a very good report from National Security Commission for Artificial Intelligence, NSCAI, and basically that's what we're trying to implement in federal government, is to ensure we have V&V, assurance, explainability, and responsible AI that aligns with US Constitution and ethical human and values, right? That's where it comes down to. And we are in early stages, as I mentioned early on. Some of the regulations are still being formed, but I think our underlying overarching principles is good. We always want human being to be in charge. Even though it may be on the loop, we may use AI for different purposes, but we want to make sure we manage the machine, not machine managing us.
You basically answered a couple questions, and so we have just another thing from our audience. Is there going to be a mandate from the US government that this should be implemented in the near future in regards with the private sector?
I think there are two regulations that's out there, not specifically to AI, but NSM 8, which is around zero trust, which is a best practice to protect your existing systems, which goes back to segmentations, isolation, and all the basic practices to reduce your attack surface or threat surface, so you have assurance of your system. From this NSM 10, which is about quantum safe encryption, so your systems are protected from an adversary's quantum computer. Otherwise, right now it's okay, but down the lane, when there is massive large-scale computing power, is there a risk for source algorithm? I don't know that, but it is better to protect your systems, especially which have higher economic value, right? So that is an important aspect. So that is NSM 10. So we have two national security memorandums. 8 is for zero trust, 10 is for quantum safe encryption. As far as AI is concerned, I think the only thing I'm aware of is the responsible AI memo from DOD and the Bill of Rights from the White House. But I think as we start issuing RFPs and contracts, there will be more language that would go into ethics of AI, verification, validation, adversarial robustness. And we want to make sure it's consistent and it can be applied. Because if I'm comparing, not just me, there's 4 separate agencies issues for AI RFPs, and we are evaluating 7 or 8 different vendors. Are we evaluating everybody on the same scale? Right, that is where standardization of policies and requirements or non-functional requirements become important. So I would think the NIST RMF for AI would become a foundational building block for most of the federal agencies in the government.
Dr. Malek?
Yeah, I was going to mention that there are a few bills around in the Congress around AI, regulating AI, but there is no regulation per se.
Okay. moving on to our third topic, solutions and approaches. And I want to ask, I want to stay with you, Dr. Malek. Can you provide recommendations to organizations that are interested in deploying Edge AI?
Sure. I think if you're interested in deploying Edge AI, you want to start with building a core innovation team that looks at the use cases across all of your businesses, identifies the right use cases, and weighs measurable business value, attaches business value to each of those use cases. You want to have that team, once you identify the use cases, you want to have them work with data scientists, with data developers, and security engineers to make sure that whatever prototypes they come up with are secure. Also, one of the things that I've seen working with my client is that AI in many cases stops at the prototype phase, right? But it never makes it all the way to a fully scalable deployment. So what you want to focus on as well is building trust around the AI application that is being built, building trust internally and externally by the people who are going to be adopting those or using those AI applications, so that they can work with them, so that they can accept their deployment. And also you want to work on upskilling the people who will be using these AI applications, and perhaps making AI more accessible. Have the citizen AI developer, if you will, so that more and more use cases are discovered, and you can deploy a lot more applications at the edge. But if I cannot emphasize enough the need to build trust into these AI applications and design them in a trustworthy manner from the onset, because that trust is going to be key to adoption. And what we mean by trust, I refer again to the AI risk management framework, which talks about how to build trustworthy AI systems, including the explainability aspects and the security aspects and privacy, etc.
Ramesh, you unmuted yourself. Do you have?
I just want to emphasize the importance of requirements, right? Because typically any emerging technology starts in a lab and scientists are people creating it, but we need to turn the discussion to a boardroom discussion and say, how does it increase my revenue, profits, and what does it mean to my business model? How does it change my organizational design? What's my go-to-market strategy? And change the discussion to a CEO, because that's when you see the value. And I think because of the knowledge gap, many C-level executives are not there at that level, but it's up to the engineers and scientists to take the technology story and make it to business story, right? Because if you come and tell all these complex, I have a transfer learning model, blah, 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 or if I can come and tell, I can reduce the new product development cost by 75% and scale, and the marginal cost of scaling is 1/10 of what you were doing currently, I mean, that would get a lot more attention from CFO and CEO, right? I think it is also for people to really understand their business models and turn the discussions into the metrics that their leadership will support, while technology is continuing to evolve. So it's balance between your specific industry and the underlying capabilities based on your core capabilities, right? Obviously, you cannot do everything, right? What works for you may not work for me. And again, generally large companies who have a lot of data would benefit from AI, whether it is, and you need to understand which business process do I focus on first. Is it going to be IT for things like AI ops to integrate NOC and SOC? Is it going to be finance for certain account receivables, or is it going to be human resources for talent management, attraction and retention, or is it for diversity, equity and inclusion, or to eliminate bias in certain types of scenarios? So I think what the use case is, I don't know, but technology can be used for anything, both good and bad. And this is where it is important to take the discussion a higher level and CEOs have to embed this into their digital transformation strategies.
Felipe, do you have any real-world examples, maybe of AI being successfully implemented that might be inspiring for edge AI?
Yeah, there are a few examples. I mean, especially for smart cities, which is quite commonly a good scenario where AI, edge AI can be applied, right? Where they can basically analyze the road sign, manage the traffic in real time, using a combination of sensor cameras, machine learning algorithms to optimize the traffic and the flow of those cities, for example. This is one, but obviously when you're looking even and trying to combine with sustainability aspects, for example, right? Where scope 3, big topic, reducing greenhouse emissions, for example. There's a quite interesting case in smart packaging, where AI algorithms at the floor, at the top of the plant, right at the edge of the plant, they will understand the volumes of products being generated, for example, understanding the demands, regardless of what they are and how much they change through the time, in a way that can start ordering packages or ordering proper amount of packages for this specific product. So you don't place orders too much upfront, or eventually sizing it wrongly or estimating it wrongly. So that helps a lot with with the greenhouse footprint of your products through the supply chain on the scope 3 side, which is where it really generates a lot, right, in the supply chain actually. So just a couple of examples that I could share on top of my head there.
Ashish, how can organizations bring real intelligence into protecting artificial intelligence?
That's a very good question. We all talk about artificial intelligence, but we sometimes forget the importance of real intelligence. I think Ramesh alluded to it earlier, right? They would always want real human intelligence on top of artificial intelligence. But anyways, specifically addressing the question you asked about how do we protect the security and privacy, I think there are a few controls that come to mind. First and foremost, because we must understand, before I answer this question, we must understand we're talking about decentralized systems. We are talking about systems out in the field, or in homes, or in factories, or in a moving vehicle. So the environment is a bit challenging, right? So one thing that I would say to start with is to implement strong identity and access controls. And I think like Carmi mentioned about encryption of data at rest in transit to protect sensitive data. That's first and foremost. In terms of protecting the edge network, so to say, obviously a lot of SASE solutions nowadays are in the market that can really be of great help in leapfrogging the efforts to run a cleaner, if not clean, secured environment from a viewpoint of network security risks. I would also say that ongoing testing and review of security of edge devices and AI models as well to identify and address vulnerabilities that could be design level vulnerabilities. One thing I would definitely say, like I mentioned earlier as well, and I think Carmi alluded, kind of expanded that and brought the point of zero trust, is that we must invest heavily in terms of detection and response, not just prevention. And I think because this is a very, how should I say this? This is a very nascent, if not very nascent, I would say relatively newer field. And a lot of vendors, suppliers, manufacturers, service providers are kind of getting into this. I think a very thorough supply chain security program is important. And I would say last but not the least, obviously, like Ramesh mentioned, and I think I love that, you need some level of human oversight to bring that real intelligence on top. So I think, end of the day, AI has obviously, it has what it takes to kind of make a meaningful and long-lasting impact to kind of improve our lives, support digitalization initiatives, give impetus to industrial automation. But obviously, it poses significant risk, like we explained earlier. So I think if we really implement secure by design, privacy by design principles, ensure, like I said, continuous monitoring of AI systems, supply chain security, have a very strong governance framework to address the bias and ethics side of thing as well. I think we can definitely make the best of use of AI. Thank you.
Another question, or should I say comment, from our audience. It's more of a general AI question, not specifically edge AI, but it's interesting. People are concerned that they will be replaced by AI. What do you think, panelists? Yes, Carmi.
So first of all, I think that in general, Terminator movies don't help, but Hollywood aside, AI is just a tool. Tools are good and tools are bad. Nuclear reactors, atomic bombs, and other things. In general, you can't fight technology. It's going to come, and you just have to learn the best way to adapt it and take it. I also don't think that new technology replacing jobs is a bad thing. I wonder how many people in 2022 would like the job of shoveling horse stables. It really wasn't, it was a job and it got replaced by the automotive industry. I don't think we miss it. I mean, it literally was, well, I don't need to explain what type of job that was. So as society evolves and technology evolves, types of jobs become better and more advanced. I can tell you on a personal level, my wife teaches in college, and ChatGPT is really challenging in giving exercises to students that cannot be answered by ChatGPT when it comes to programming. So this is a challenge. It's really hard. And so, but that doesn't mean that you should outlaw it, or even if you can, we can't avoid technology. In fact, I think most of the people on this panel have been living with technology for most of their life. In many cases, it's helped put our kids through college, it's bought our house and paid our mortgage. So we like technology. We like learning about new technology. And so I would just drop the fear and realize that technology is inevitable. And even if you do lose your job, you'll be better off finding something to do with it. Just think about the guy who's no longer cleaning the stables in the Wild West. You really don't want to be there.
Felipe?
Yeah, just to mention a fun fact, actually I know somebody that just graduated in language and literature, and actually, no perspectives at all. And then suddenly there are a lot of different people trying to hire those people that know how to prompt well AI, how to help AI to think, or prompt the question, frame the questions much better than maybe any of us here, computer sciences or engineers, right? That's one aspect. And a second aspect is that I've been talking to a lot of companies this year with the Deloitte Tech Trends Report 2023. And there is a topic around AI, which is called Open Up to AI, Trusting Our Inorganic Colleagues. And we're not talking about how great the deep learning algorithms are, how advanced they are, or anything like that. But rather, we're showing exactly cases such as American Airlines working with their workforce, transforming 4 hours of gating process, planning planes around the airport over the next day, between 4 hours, moving that to 2.5 minutes with the use of AI. But the way that they approach, it was not throwing an AI to their team and say, you got to use that, now it's going to do your job, but more as a sort of a change management process in a way that people were, happily to build this sort of solution, proud to build. So it's more a matter of buying actually than necessary to trust it, to make it transparent understanding the commands, understanding the steps, in a way that they can onboard this tool. So instead of seeing something like, oh no, AI is coming for my job, they're actually saying, okay, my job is changing and I can do higher order type of activities, and AI can do all these boring, very computer scientific problem that it can be solved by a sequence of steps, a little bit more elaborated this time. So that's a very different approach that we've seen some companies successfully implementing AI without people fearing for their jobs. So just want to make that beauty on top of it.
With airports, as you mentioned, let's say airport biometrics, someone will have to make sure this personal data is secure. So hello.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where they place their workforce. I mean, instead of having people 4 hours overnight, trying to make sense where the planes are coming, where the planes are taxiing, loading, which would be faster and so forth, and the routes, which is pretty much like a computer science problem. They are released to deal with the people that are there. There are delayed flights that were delayed, maybe something that needs to be adjusted, some very human specific requirement or assistant that is needed. So they're really there where the people needs, not where the mathematical situation is, right? So
Dr. Malek?
Yeah, so Accenture has just released a report around ChatGPT and generative AI in general. And in that report, they've identified that about 40% of the tasks that knowledge workers engage in will be done through AI, or AI can perform them. That being said, it's 40% of tasks, not 40% of jobs. So while there are some jobs where I think less than 10%, where 90% of the tasks will be completely automated, those are only 10% of the jobs. So most of the jobs, by and large, will be there, but some tasks will be automated. So what I would urge the audience is to think about which tasks you're doing today that can be automated, and embrace AI. Maybe use it to help you do something else that is more rewarding. And as typically people will tell you the radiologists will not go away, but the radiologists that do not use AI will not be there. The ones who will remain are the radiologists who leverage AI to help them make a diagnostic. So I think, I would encourage everyone again to embrace AI, see where it can help you. And
it's just another tool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Swami, regarding new threats, can you elaborate on how standardization forums address this issue?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? So the security standards have been there for years. Okay, there's no change in that. So now what has been changed now is we are getting more AI and ML into that, and then we are just seeing that how the standards are proposing certain measures in order to handle that. For example, right? So if you see HC is having a more group like securing the artificial intelligence, call it as an SAI. They're already working on these aspects, and then they have been, this domain will gain more significance with the prevalence of the AI ML use case in 5G and then 6G. So they've already coming up with best practices which we need to do for the network cybersecurity, which includes, as we have already talked, very much on the zero trust approach, and then also the continuous monitoring and then security tests, right? So that needs to be done. I think that also the panelists have been talking about. And then the data protection and then privacy and then defensive mechanisms. They have been talking about and then telling about best practices. To name few, right? The NIST is also having a cybersecurity framework. And then ISO is also having certain standards. In addition to whatever we have talked about, the HIPAA and then privacy rules, there are standards which have been talking about this best practices which we need to use. Yeah.
Another question from our audience. Well, would some of the panelists want to share their contact information for initiating offline conversations later? So feel free to write your emails in the chat box. Okay, I see Felipe and Dr. Malek, you also unmuted yourselves. Felipe,
Connect with me on-
Dr. Malek?
And Moran, I just think that the same contact information that was got from Hub Security will be the center for stuff going in and out. So any panelist who wants to be contacted could send the stuff to Moran/Lior, who you know who that is. And any participant, just contact Hub Security and we will distribute out all information of the panelists. I think, Moran, are we coming to the end?
Yeah, we still have 5 more minutes.
Okay,
and
sorry.
Dr. Malek was about to say something.
Well, I was gonna say, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to have a conversation.
So,
Perfect.
I just like to say that right now we're at 80 participants. I think the number was really high. We had over 45 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
I found this to be a very
With over, I think we had like 150 attendees, even more.
So I'd like to thank all the people who attended. I think that the questions were really good. I really would like to, in the name of Hub Security, thank all of the panelists. I personally learned a lot from the discussion, and I think that your participation was knowledgeable, entertaining at the same time, and that's the most you can ask for. And if you know, and I just want to thank Moran for her ongoing leadership, although you do this with your hands a lot, but that's okay. That's fine. And thank you all for joining and participating. If anybody else has any summary remarks, it'd be great to hear them now.
I just appreciate the time and great to be here as well. I appreciate the invitation and happy to connect with the audience further.
Yeah, thank you all. Great session.
Ryan, you're mute.
Perfect. So if we don't have any more questions, I would like to thank you everyone for joining us, and a special thank you to our speakers, Carmi Boga, Ramesh, Dr. Malek, Felipe, Swami, and Ashish. Thank you all so much. We look forward to hosting many more discussions like these in the future. To stay up to date on upcoming webinars, follow Hub Security on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next time.